Daniels will be the 8th different Week 1 starter for the Commanders in the last 8 seasons. This list includes Sam Howell, Carson Wentz, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Dwayne Haskins, Case Keenum, Alex Smith, and Kirk Cousins, who was the last person to start consecutive Week 1s for Washington. That's the most different Week 1 starters by any team in the last 8 seasons, assuming Anthony Richardson starts Week 1 for the Colts. You guys were taking pictures of that.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable.
I know. It's wild. Nina, we've now gotten to see a little bit more of this Cliff Kingsbury offense there in Washington. How do you think it's fitting with Jayden Daniels so far? Because that was one of our big questions going in.
It is, and that's what I found interesting about this. It was, by the way, so funny to watch those highlights after Caleb's, because it was a good example of how, you know, both quarterbacks playing wildly different offenses can play really well when they're asked to do wildly different things. But in the case of Daniels, it was obviously clear that they went into this game with the intention of getting the ball quickly out of his hands. You saw, Dan alluded to this, RPOs, that quick hitting play action from the gun I thought was really interesting because he's going to live in the gun. And Dan, what this sort of showed me, and you never want to take too much out of the preseason, is Cliff Kingsbury is going to lean on a lot of this, I think, to mitigate what I feel will be issues with this offensive line. We will see a lot of quick game because Jayden Daniels is very decisive. He is accurate when he throws the ball quick as well. We will see a lot of RPOs. We will see that quick hitting play action, pairing that with, I think, strong rushing attack led by Brian Robinson. To me, that's going to be a huge part of this offense, not just because those are college concepts we saw Jayden Daniels do well at LSU, but because it'll allow them to, you know, address what I feel will be issues in pass protection on longer developing plays.
Well, you're talking about Cliff Kingsbury, right? They also hired Anthony Lynn from the 49ers to coach their run game. So you know they're going to be physical running the football, and you know they're going to run the football to complement the passing game that Cliff Kingsbury institutes.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting. You saw some no huddle this week as well. So, you know, I think Washington's very aware, really good quarterback, and they've got pretty darn good perimeter players. So if they can get that offensive line to play at a, you know, a plus level, they got a chance to have a good offense. I think the biggest question for me, MK, is going to be this. Jayden handled a lot of the protection stuff at LSU. He would make protection changes and whatnot. Cliff, that's not necessarily a big part of his offense, and especially when you're playing with tempo. Laura, you both played that highlight, but like he gets this off-ball defender to pressure, and more often than not, you throw into the pressure. There's 2 guys open. Jayden just drifts back, and basically this is a wasted play. It's almost like a long foul ball. How much does the comfort level between those 2 guys get to be on the same page with that? When teams start to give them different pressures, is Jayden going to be good enough to change the protection? Because when I watched that one, I said, well, Jayden obviously realizes it's coming. He feels the pressure, he drifts, and then he just throws it out of bounds. And my question is, how much are they going to empower him? How much can he handle? And then will they be able to handle some of those unique pressures he's going to see in the NFL that he was capable of doing it at LSU, because it's not necessarily Cliff's DNA?
Yeah, listen, I think that's just going to be something that's just going to take a second. It's going to take time, not only for him to be comfortable doing all those things in the NFL, but as well as just him developing his relationship with Cliff Kingsbury, right? Like that's kind of what preseason is, and that's always been, those little things right there are one of the big reasons why a lot of teams, or a lot of people in general, coaches, however we want to, you know, wherever we want to say it's coming from, want to play their younger players, not even just quarterbacks, but obviously we're talking about quarterbacks here, you know, younger quarterbacks in preseason, in those moments, because those types of things become a little bit harder, a lot bit harder to simulate in just practices. So I think it's those little things that just take a second or two to kind of develop, to kind of get comfortable. I think one of the best things that Jayden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury will be able to do together is that they're going to, because we saw that all those quarterbacks, right, for the Commanders. And I think essentially for the first time in nearly 10 years, like literally in a decade, the Commanders are actually going to have a legitimate offensive identity. They're actually going to have a legitimate offensive identity that the offense and the team as a whole can get behind. And it's just going to make everything so much easier. Because before, you know what it honestly felt like? It was like you're just turning on Madden and you're just like, I don't actually really know how to play. I don't really actually know football. I just call hike and I just see who's open and I hit square, you know, triangle, whatever console you're playing on, right? Like R2. You're just like guessing. You're just like, hey, you know, when you're picking a play, you're like, this play, this guy goes here, this guy goes over there, this guy kind of like comes around. I'll do that play. I mean, seriously, it was just like, what are we actually doing here? I mean, if you were a legitimate Commanders fan, I don't know how you ever felt going into games. You know, like how you felt offensively, like what was actually going to happen in any single game. The Commanders are going to finally have an identity. And having an identity on a football team is just so important. So important. It just doesn't, you know, I don't even want to say backyard football because it wasn't even what they were doing was backyard football. I just really don't know what it's been like for the last, you know, however many years. And, you know, listen, some of that is on the Commanders. Some of that is just, you know, not being able to secure the quarterback position. But like even when they had someone like a Carson Wentz, and I'm actually a fan of Carson Wentz, you know, look no further than Shanahan and Andy Reid both wanting him. Clearly there's something to him, otherwise they wouldn't waste their time. Andy Reid doesn't need to waste his time with someone like a Carson Wentz, so there's clearly something there. But they couldn't even form even like a somewhat identity around someone like a Carson Wentz, not even be able to go back and look what he's done, what's made him successful in the past. And that's actually what the Eagles were able to do with the Nick Foles, actually. And that's how they were able to win the Super Bowl. They went back in time and said, let's look and see what Nick Foles does great and what he doesn't do so great and build an identity around that. And that's what they did. And it led to a Super Bowl. But for whatever reason, the Commanders in years past just failed to do that. Even with quarterbacks that have enough film, enough experience to be like, okay, like let's go back and see what you do. Instead of just being like, all right, he's our quarterback. Let's just get out there and see what happens. Listen, obviously it's a completely new reign. I've talked about this a lot with the Commanders. It's very exciting. Dan Quinn, Cliff Kingsbury, Jayden Daniels, those big three I think have the potential to completely change the story for the Commanders. 100%. And I think that that's really exciting. And so that's why I think that's, you know, the real thing that I want to emphasize in this video more than anything, since I've been talking so much about Jayden and unpacking it from different angles, is just the identity factor and not getting too lost in what Orlovsky's talking about. It's definitely an issue. You know, there's definitely those things that need to be worked out, right? Like any quarterback. But I fear when we highlight some of those things, especially in preseason or just early on in someone's career, that then gets emphasized as a way to say, see, Jayden Daniels can't do something, or he's failing to make the right decision, or he's failing to make the right reads. And that's not my interpretation. And I that's why I don't want to ever just take like a few single plays in a preseason game, or even like a regular season game for that matter, for a rookie, and just be like, you know, circle it gigantically in big red marker and say, this is something that this is of an issue. And you know, you have to wait to see if it becomes a pattern first before something is considered an issue. I guarantee you probably could find some film of Patrick Mahomes making a similar decision. You could be like, he needs to work on this. And it's like, no, this is just something that happened in that moment. So it'll be interesting to see the type of quarterback that Jayden can develop into. And I'm more closely interested in seeing how his relationship with Cliff Kingsbury develops, because him and Kyler Murray were on such a good trajectory, but the relationship was not. And I blame Kyler for that more than anything. And then injuries happened, and they're just a poorly run franchise out there in Arizona, and things frayed. But the truth is, if they were able to develop a legitimate relationship, I think they could have been great together. And so honestly, Kyler Murray's immaturity, which I don't see Jayden has, is going to be Jayden's benefit now. You know, it's one man's trash is another man's gold, and I think the Washington Commanders and Jayden Daniels are going to benefit greatly from Cliff Kingsbury. But those are just my thoughts. I would absolutely love to hear yours. What do you guys all think? What are your expectations for Jayden Daniels? You know, what do you think about the Commanders finally having a quarterback who should be able to be the starter at the minimum for the next 2 years outside of, you know, injuries, and just the identity that they're trying to form? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single comment, so whether you agree with me or disagree with me, Either way, let's get in some discussions, let's get in some fights, but ultimately, let's just have some fun. And please do consider subscribing. We are building an amazing community here, and I would absolutely love to see you part of it. I want to build something that we all genuinely feel connected to, something that we're really excited to be part of. I think we're well on our way to doing it. And please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, as it really does help with the visibility and the algorithm. Thank you so much, and see you next time.